Going into this season, the New York Rangers had some pretty big expectations of possibly being a true Stanley Cup contender once again like they were last season, making it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. And with the up and downs of this season so far, and with the Rangers making that big trade for JT Miller, obviously sending away Filipino, a first-round pick, alongside Victor Mancini as well, and getting back, a couple players, a decent defenseman, kind of a depth guy in Eric Brandstrom, as well as a decent prospect in Jackson Dorrington. You obviously get back JT Miller as well. That's a pretty big trade there, and that's kind of a buying trade, although the Rangers did get back, a decent young guy in Jackson Dorrington. The main part of that trade was to get that star caliber player or superstar caliber player in JT Miller. So that's a buying move, and the Rangers could very well, with them being, fairly close to a playoffs, but obviously not in one right now, and definitely on the outside looking in at this moment, but they're not out of the race at this point, and although there are quite a few other teams kind of competing right now as well, and it's going to be a really tough race, they have a chance there, and this Rangers team very well could end up being buyers at this deadline. And although they kind of already have been buyers, make more kind of buying moves around this deadline that will happen on March 7th. And if this team does decide to be buyers, I can understand that, and that could make a bit of sense for sure. But I think the main thing that we need to kind of hope that this Rangers team does not do, and kind of the main point of this video that we're going to talk about, is the Rangers not giving up high-tier assets for rental players. And the Rangers have done that a ton in the past. And, a moment, sure, making those kind of big buying moves and sending those first-round picks and other kind of high-tier assets for kind of win-now players and expiring contracts and rental players, yes, it can make sense for sure. But with where the Rangers are at right now and with how this season has gone, it definitely does not make much sense for this team to give up high-tier prospects or high-tier draft capital for, rental contracts. And, I think going after rentals this season, I can be okay with that in a certain kind of a trade. And that is, by using kind of lower tier prospects and lower tier draft capital. If it is going to be a 6th-round pick and a very low tier prospect for a, all right third line center, or just an okay third line center who's a rental, I could live with that. A 5th-round pick, even an okay prospect, I could live with that even this season for a rental third line center. But if you're talking about a, first, second, or third rounder and a good prospect, that's just a little ridiculous in my opinion with where this team is at right now. To give up these high tier assets, it would make no sense in my opinion to give up even a guy like Brennan Hoffman. And there was an article that did come out from the New York Post, Larry Brooks, where he kind of talked about how he is a little concerned on the Rangers possibly using a prospect like Brennan Hoffman in a trade at the deadline for a rental. And he's a perfect example of that. If you use a guy like Brennan Hoffman in a trade, whether you're including a draft pick or not, for a rental player, unless you really have a great idea on, having the possibility of re-signing him and you're really kind of certain on that happening, then maybe it could possibly make sense. But with where the Rangers are at, giving up that valuable of an asset, one of the Rangers' truly most valuable assets that they do have, draft pick-wise or prospect-wise, I think that's probably just not the right idea this season. And maybe it is next season even, when this team maybe is looking like a much better, more complete team, when, Chris Drury has had this whole upcoming offseason to kind of make some big moves there and add in maybe another really kind of star caliber defenseman possibly. And then this D-core is looking a lot better. The forward core maybe gets a player added on the depth side of things there in the bottom 6 or on the third line or something. And then you see some other kind of young guys take those steps up. And then this team's looking a lot better. And next trade deadline, when this team's looking a lot more competitive and a lot more complete and a lot more ready to truly kind of go for that cup and really make that push, and maybe they are that 1 or kind of 2 pieces away from really making that push, then maybe it does make sense then to trade away some high-tier assets in a deal for rental. And we obviously did recently see the Vancouver Canucks use that first-round pick that they got in the deal for JT Miller from the Rangers, and they used that pick, sending that over to the Pittsburgh Penguins for Marcus Pettersson, the rental defenseman, who they ended up locking up on a pretty decently long deal as well. So there definitely is that option where the Rangers could look at a different rental player and, maybe have a pretty good idea on possibly being able to kind of extend that certain player, and they make that trade for the rental. They give that high-tier asset or 2 or 3, whatever it is, but they're able to kind of extend that player. So I definitely think that could make a bit of sense for this Rangers team, who are going to have quite a bit of cap space available this upcoming offseason. So if they want to go out there and make a trade for a rental player who's going to be an upcoming free agent who they've already kind of been thinking on possibly, looking at signing this coming offseason, maybe you want to make that move now. And although, yes, you're giving up that asset now, maybe you are able to kind of, get that player on a bit of a cheaper contract, and you're obviously getting them right away as well. So that could work out a little better for the Rangers long term. But either way, I think this team's going to be active, and they're going to be trying to make some more kind of buying moves more than likely. Do they make a move to kind of trade away a guy like Ryan Lindgren and possibly bring in a different defenseman? That's a possibility, and I definitely would be more than okay with that as well if that did happen. I think it could be a good idea to do so. Obviously, I don't want to see this team go out there, like I said, and make those big kind of buying moves for a rental and trade away some high-tier assets. But if it is some kind of lower tier kind of picks, a fifth or kind of later round picks, and really and truly some kind of lower tier prospects, I think going after some rentals for that kind of stuff is really not too big of a deal. And if it is kind of higher tier stuff for rentals, it is what it is. But personally, like I kind of talked about in this video, I just don't think with where the Rangers are at, that's kind of the perfect and kind of best decision for this team. But obviously, I don't get to make those decisions, so we'll have to wait and see what Chris Drury does decide to do and kind of how much pressure he feels is on him to kind of have some real playoff success this season. And I do think the Rangers definitely need to go after a third-line center, though, if they really want to make that push for the playoffs. I think that's something that definitely needs to be done. And, not just to make the playoffs, but if they want to at least have a chance of really, making maybe an upset in that first round happen, you need to get some center depth. And if the Rangers are not going to put advantage at all in that third-line center spot, which I don't think they have to. I mean, he's started to look decent, obviously, and maybe play a bit better since he's kind of gone to the wing there. So I think that could be good for this team, and Zibanejad to try and get him back on track there, maybe playing on the wing, try and get him going a bit more, and obviously kind of make him, not as much of a negative asset potentially. And then you also have the fact where right now, Brzezinski on that third line center spot where he's a fine player to have, and I think maybe some Rangers fans maybe overhate him a little bit at moments, but I think for what he brings and what his role is, which I think is in a kind of depth role. I think he's that kind of 13th forward, 12th forward type of player. I don't think he's much more than that, but I think he can be a nice kind of depth player. If he's your healthy scratch type player, then I think that's fine for sure. He can play center, he can play wing, brings a bit of feistiness, a bit of offense, a bit of speed. I mean, he's obviously not the most talented player, but I think is a fine kind of depth forward for this Rangers team. And to have that versatility as a depth player, I think is nice. But if the Rangers really want to make that push for the playoffs and really have a chance on going on a big run, you probably want to upgrade over someone like Brzezinski. So I think going up there and making a trade for a third-line center is a big need and really kind of a must if this team wants to compete. But obviously going out there and not spending a lot on maybe a rental is probably what's better for this team. And there are definitely going to be quite a few options out there, I'm sure, for a potential third-line center. How good of one the Rangers want to go after? That's kind of the question, whether or not they can go after maybe someone with a bit of term or maybe someone who's, somewhat young possibly, who has, a bit of kind of team control, whether they're, an RFA or a couple more years under contract. That could also be a good idea, possibly a younger kind of player as well, who's maybe a good kind of future fit. We'll have to wait and see, but either way, this team will probably be active, and adding in a third-line center should definitely be at the top of their list. But anyways, in the comment section down below, let me know your thoughts on today's video. What kind of moves do you want to see the Rangers make? Do you want to see a third-line center added? And also, what are your thoughts on kind of what I talked about earlier on in this video about the Rangers not making, a big move for a rental and kind of trading away those kind of high-tier assets and maybe looking more towards kind of going after maybe some kind of lower-tier rentals and maybe some players who have a bit of, at least term under their deals if they're going to be looking to spend those high-tier assets. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Hit that subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.